This is the craziest 8 measures of music, and it's from one of the greatest soundtracks in all of video games. After weeks of analysis on just these 20 seconds, I made some magical discoveries that will completely change the way you think about music. Here's what it sounds like. It all begins with the instruments. While much of Mario Galaxy's soundtrack is known for its expansive orchestral sound, this track, called Chance to Grab a Star, uses a warm synth pad in the lower voice and a bright vibrato heavy synth for the melody. Why were these instruments chosen? Well, the synthpad accompaniment isn't just there to harmonize the melody. Here, it repeats the same chord over and over again, fading in and out. It's like a lost satellite playing a signal that echoes through the emptiness of space, destined to float around for the rest of eternity. And in the melody, the synth has a tiny voice that's also on this space journey. The slight vibrato in the synth gives the impression that the voice is singing. Within the context of the game, the melody plays a very compelling role. While the music plays, there's a star waiting for you to collect. This melody could be like a siren from Greek mythology, singing a beautiful song to draw you nearer to a powerful treasure that will literally drag you away. Could the composer have intended these subtle yet sinister ideas when writing this? To find out, let's take a closer look at the melody. Right off the bat, you can tell there's complexity in the harmony, but I want to look at something less obvious first: the phrasing. Or should I really say the lack of phrasing, because the composer did absolutely everything in their power to create something out of the ordinary. We can begin by looking at what patterns do exist in the melody, and we can determine groupings of 2 measures by identifying an intervallic motive. The motive begins with a whole step, and 3 of these 4 groupings continue with a whole step on the next half note. In fact, each of these 3 groupings descend by a whole step twice. It's only the 4th grouping that betrays this pattern, but we'll come back to this. And that motive is where the regularity ends. Besides the small motive, nothing else is regular about the melody at all. In the first grouping, the whole steps are followed by a descending half step. The second grouping is followed by an ascending perfect fifth. The third grouping is followed by a descending major third. This effect is such that our ears have a hard time predicting what's going to come next, and this lack of predictability is a major theme in this music. It's this randomness that contributes to a sense of eternity by avoiding a predictable melodic loop. It sounds so strange and alien that the melody itself feels drawn from the deepness of unexplored space. But back to this last grouping. It's even stranger. The first 2 notes are the only time a grouping begins by ascending. Then for the first time, as we are already getting used to a variety of somewhat random intervallic leaps, the same note is played back to back. Then the section ends abruptly with a jump of a perfect 4th. And when it repeats back to the beginning, it does so by an interval of a whole step. This is strange to us because we clearly feel in the music that a descending whole step is the beginning of the motivic idea that starts each of the 2 measure groupings. So when it's done a beat early on the transition, our concept of the downbeat is significantly thrown off. This deep melodic analysis is to show that this melody is more of an anti-melody. There are plenty of opportunities for a satisfying conclusion or resolution to these sets of notes, but what happens instead is an opportunity for the music to become more than the melody. It's not about the motivic material, but rather about the unnatural ambiance that occurs when melody is decentralized and other details are able to shine, such as timbre, rhythm, and harmony. Which brings us to the most important part of this music, which is the harmony. Now, here is the meat of what makes this all work. The chord analysis itself is simple. The first 4 measures are just an E chord being colored by the melody. The same is true for the G minor chords in measures 5 and 6. Then, in measures 7 and 8, the harmonic rhythm increases. The first chord maintains a G minor harmony, then moves to A minor 7, F minor 7, and B flat minor 7. Finding relationships between each harmony is much more complicated. The relationship between this E major chord and G minor chord is something called a doubly chromatic mediant relationship. A doubly chromatic mediant relationship is when 2 chords have 0 common notes between them and are of opposing qualities. In other words, 1 chord is major and 1 chord is in minor. The relationship is often used in huge cinematic scores to introduce the idea of scale or drama. Of course, in the last two measures, 3 or more completely unrelated chords are thrown in. They are completely unrelated to one another except for just one common tone, and this is one huge reason why the music feels so alien and strange to us, because there are not any close relationships between any chords that are innately satisfying. It's just sound after sound, echoing with no real destination. It's also worth noting that in the absence of variance in rhythm, harmonic rhythm, or the rate at which harmonies change, is substituted. Just like the synth pad crescendos and decrescendos, the entire piece of music creates a crescendo in the harmonic rhythm before. The E major harmony is held for 16 beats, the G minor harmony is held for 10 beats, and each of the last 3 chords are held for 2 beats each before returning to E major. It makes the whole phrase sound circular in nature, an artificial rate of change that repeats forever, like a sound wave or a signal. But even then, there's still so much more to these harmonies to unpack, and that's in the inversions of each chord. You may have noticed that the music has this levitating quality to it, as if the harmonies just float without ever returning to home base. The composer has used a special technique to achieve this effect, and of course, that's the chord inversions. In its most basic form, a chord is built from bottom to top. The bottom note is known as the root and gives the chord a very clear, defined quality. When the root is not at the bottom of the chord stack, the harmonic intent of the chord is less clear. The root generally defines the exact quality of the chord, but without it on the bottom, we lose perspective. In this piece, only 2 chords are played with the root at the bottom of the chord. The E major and G minor chords, the chords that make up most of this piece, are inverted along with this F minor 7 chord. The resulting quality is hollow and empty. Without the root playing a role, the harmonic direction is further neglected and the music becomes aimless. And finally, the most important element of this piece is the one that connects it back to the entire Mario Galaxy universe. It's a composition technique that literally ties back to the main theme, but it also subtly reminds us that we're on a fantastic adventure. This technique is the use of the Lydian mode. Here in the opening 4 measures, the notes used are E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, and D sharp. This grouping of pitches is of course called the Lydian scale, a scale used so prominently in the soundtrack, specifically in the opening theme. It's a scale that's so deeply connected to space and sci-fi that it's hard not for it to have a subtle effect right as you hear the A sharp in measure 2. It's a gentle reminder of the adventure that just took place, and the calmness you feel right now is only the eye of the hurricane. So yeah, those 8 measures are insanely packed with theory. Leave a suggestion in the comments if there are any other amazing soundtracks that you want me to unpack. Don't forget to subscribe, and thank you for watching.